Okay, let's continue it. All right, we're going to jump back to number 2. There's some unfinished business we have to do.
Yeah, I separated the presentation. Can you imagine if this was part of that other presentation? No, that's why I try to break it up. Okay, I was also asked to talk about the teeter funds. We talked a little bit about it in the morning. So this is kind of a you will have seen this before because I've talked about it before. Kind of the history. The teeter plan was the brainchild of the auditor controller of Contra Costa County, Desmond Teeter, and basically what he did is he's had legislation enacted that changed the revenue and taxation code that allowed for counties to buy up all the receivables of deficient taxes that are late taxes that haven't been paid. Counties can buy them from in the teeter plan from counties, from cities, special districts, and schools. So what it does is this teeter plan is it allows us to my office, the Auditor Controller's office, to buy to ensure that 100% of all the taxes that have been calculated to go out to the schools and the cities, the county, special districts, for them to each agency gets 100% of their property tax allocation. So they don't have to worry about when people don't pay their taxes because they're getting 100%. The teeter plan is buying all the receivables, all of those deficient taxes from those from the schools, from all those agencies, including the county. So we buy them and we hold on to them until they're made good. Generally, it's through a foreclosure action of some type, where we will collect not only the principal amount of the taxes, but penalties and interest. And I know this is one of Marty's favorite subjects because he'd love to be part of this teeter plan, because we get about 18% interest on our money.
Hey.
Wow.
Only in America.
And okay, so the teeter plan, what it did is, the reason why this was enacted is because it was a way of ensuring that each agency got all their taxes every year, and they didn't have to worry about those years where, like we saw during the Great Recession, when a whole lot of people weren't paying their taxes. And it was based upon an assessed value that was overinflated. But we in the auditor's office, we held on. We kept on. We held those reserves. We used everything we had saved up to fund those reserves and more. We had basically, the fund went negative to be able to buy those receivables, but we were paying the interest rate associated with the negative fund balance. So the big pitfall is that we need a lot of cash. In 2009, Tulare County ended their teeter fund because the cash the cash needs were so great they could not sustain the program. So they lost that revenue generator for the county. And for this county, we have been, year in, year out, have been providing the general fund with about $400,000 to $600,000 every year. And that's not including the excess revenue that we talked about earlier. And I'm going to get into that more. So how has the teeter plan performed thus far? with the property tax and special assessment buyouts. What are the cash flow requirements and the teeter delinquency revenue earnings? I've got several graphs here to talk about that. You could see here in this first graph, the new delinquencies starting in 8-9, the delinquency rate, the amount of delinquency that we bought back then was around, over $6 million. And actually, the total secured tax receivables that were unpaid at that time was over $8 million in that year. But that has gone down year after year, and we're roughly about $1 million is what is normal for us for what we buy out every year in delinquencies. Yeah, you can see in this next slide it's a little bit more. Let's see. That the blue line, the new delinquency buyout, you can see it's really, our the heyday for the teeter fund is behind us. We're just in the normal range now. Where it's not going to be the big revenue generator that it was. So it's really one-time money we're talking about for the most part, which has been sitting as excess revenue. Let's see. Okay, that really light blue line there, it's hard to see. That's kind of our beginning cash balances. You can see in 8-9 we had negative cash of over $2 million, and it wasn't until the 9-10 that we start getting positive again on cash. We had a beautiful fund balance, but our cash was negative. Let's see. But we're accumulating revenue. The bottom really light teal line shows that we're just stacking up. We're stacking up revenue in the teeter fund. This slide here kind of shows that the penalty cash received and the revenue that we recognize, they follow a pattern. They're pretty much they're related. And this one kind of shows everything. It's kind of a shows. Let's see, the change here though is the significant thing about this slide here is in 14-15 we still show all the cash because we haven't transferred it in the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year we have transferred the cash that we used in the budget, and so next year when you see this graph, it's that cash balance is going to be significantly lower because we will have made the transfers that we used operationally in the budget to pay for OPEB, to pay for the vacation and sick accruals that we had that we used last year that the board decided to bring over. And in this next year, we're going to bring over the $2 million for the Hall of Records renovation or whatever the board ends up using it for. And so again, the estimated buyouts are about $1 million a year. So we need in our teeter loss reserve fund about $300,000 to ensure that we sometimes those receivables aren't we don't get paid for them. So we we have to eat those. So that's just part of the nature of this operation. So the excess cash reserve generated in 14-15, we talked with the admin. We're planning on transferring those, basically $900,000 for operations in 16-17. So the teeter fund is still, working hard to bring in money for the general fund's use. About $600,000 for operations, and Melinda had indicated that the other $300,000 should be used for the ERP system, finishing off that system's ancillary programs. Kind of one of the big changes for the teeter in my mind has been that we've now come to a point where we're really managing the county's business in a way that is business-like. We're looking at all our unfunded liabilities and we're addressing them in some way, which wasn't the case in previous years. And so when a county is well managed, the teeter fund can be used solely for revenue generation, and all of the money that is revenue, declared revenue, can be transferred over to the general fund. But that means that there's no money in there to go and buy more receivables. So what many agencies do is they let the fund go negative, which we've done here in this county. But there's a limit to that. Basically, the treasurer may only allow that to go negative up to 3% of the total treasury fund. So if we go beyond that, I have to go outside for financing to buy the receivables, and that's okay because it's the cost of doing business. It's we're a good risk as associated with borrowing money to buy receivables. It's a good business, and I don't have a problem with doing that. So in the future, we may be seeing that I'll be coming before the board asking for the authority to seek tax revenue anticipation notes. So this is, we talked about earlier about transferring the one-time excess money. We talked about the old courthouse, $2 million that hasn't been transferred. And we already went over this about, creating a general fund capital reserve. And that was really all I had on the teeter fund.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yep. You've given us good information.
Thank you. Supervisor?
But I do want to say, though, that, Joe Paul, I really appreciate, I know that this was a lengthy report and it was broken down into a lot of sections, but it gave us a lot of really good info. So it was worth the time for you to prepare it and for us to hear it. So thank you.
Well,
I think you did an excellent job, and it does raise more questions, but that's a good thing. Helps us plan a little better.
Yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I agree. We were kind of kidding with you this morning about the long presentation, but it's a long presentation because there's so many different pots that we got to be addressing and move forward to assure the county's financial future. And you make this presentation every once in a while about teeter funds, and it's good for board members to hear this so we have a good understanding what we're dealing with, and I appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
Supervisor Munzer?
I just want to echo my other two colleagues' Thank you, Joe Paul. I know this was a lot of work, but it was a lot of good information.
Do we have the lights on? Oh, we have the mics
pleasure.
on?
I'm sorry. I'll repeat that. So I just wanted to thank Joe Paul for all his work and his great presentation.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, and thank you to our CAO, because you directed him to prepare this for us. He did a great job, a little reluctantly at first, but I think the value of it, I think you appreciated it very much. So thank you, Ray.
Ray.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, but one of the things is Joe Paul, myself, and Matt, we sit down and brainstorm and talk a lot, and these are some of the things we've been really trying to strategize to kind of look to the future. It really kind of incorporates itself to the 5-year plan that Melinda was working on, and how are we going to achieve the ability to work on our infrastructure and work on some of these things, and also to look at our operational cost, and this is just one aspect. But all kidding aside, Joe Paul was here on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. He was here late almost every night last week, as well as on Monday. So I really appreciated Joe Paul for working on this. I know it took a lot of time, a lot of effort. The same with Melinda. Melinda's been here as well, came in on Saturday as well, and she's been working on this just for today's report, as well as the budget itself. So to both of them, I want to say thank you. They've done a lot of work.
Thanks, Melinda.
Before I open it up, I'm not going to repeat what my fellow supervisor said, just one thing. Louis, I don't want to see you with any more handouts, okay?
Got more.
One more.
Oh.
Sorry.
Longer than the first one.
All right, be open to the public. Anyone for the public?
Marty Richmond from Hollis. I have a short question just to gauge where we are economically. Do you remember by any chance what our total receivables on the tax is? So if we have to teeter fund $1 million a year in a normal year, what percentage of that is what does that equal as a percentage of our total taxes that we're supposed to collect?
Oh,
Somewhere in that neighborhood. Thank you.
as a percentage of the total taxes,
You don't.
I'm gonna have to say that it is. It used to be during the bad times, it was as high as 3%, but now it's less than 1%. It's 1%. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Okay, let's move on. Moving on, we're going to go to number 5. Actuary report. Louis? Louis?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, so I'll open this up. So this is another item I've asked Joe Paul to work on.
Gotta go get.
As the board is aware, there has been a lot of reforms that we've been putting into place over the last few years. Health care reform, we've been addressing our pension, OPEB, and all of that. A lot of that's been through negotiations with with labor. Melinda's been spearheading that and the administrative side, as well as the employees within our county. And there's been some significant changes with regards to our actuarial values and numbers that we had compared to 4 or 5 years ago. So today I've asked Joe Paul to present to your board a more current actuarial study with the values and where we stand from an unfunded liability, what our values are for our ARC, and what we're obligated to pay for fiscal year 16-17. So those are, I think, real key things that we need to look at. And we are definitely making headway compared to where we were at 4 or 5 years ago. I know that there's been that old saying, it may have come from Marty, I'm not sure, or even the board is kicking that can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
This board has really taken this and dealt with it. And I think this actual report will kind of show that work. So, Joe Paul.
Okay, so
Are you cold, Melinda? No? You're good. Don't even look at me like that.
No, sir.
So the stuff that we talk about, the 3 mil, that's totally different from this one, right?
Regarding
With what's his name?
the pension, yeah, this is they're two separate. There are similarities to both, and in regards to pre-funding. So this will actually have an impact on that. And actually, I don't think those values are in this particular study, but that would actually be a benefit.
Okay.
It'll actually be a better. We put ourselves in a better situation by doing what we did this morning,
Perfect.
and these numbers would actually look better. But as of now, we went through and did an actuarial report based off of projections that we had. With the negotiations, so the 70% is 65, and a lot of these other things that we were addressing through our labor, we made those changes, and we wanted to realize those changes in fiscal year 16-17. That way, it'll reduce our operational costs, where we can put towards to either additional people or bridge that gap financially on the balance sheet.
If the computer's not mapped to it?
And it looks like Joe Paul's.
Let's just take a quick 2-minute break.
yeah, if we could take a little break now so I can locate the file.
All right. Now we're going back to number 5. 5, Joe? Yeah. Joe, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize to the board and the public for causing this delay. So much for multitasking. It doesn't work very well for me.
As long as you admit it, Joe.
Okay, so this is an actuarial report on the GASB 45 retiree benefit valuation. So it's kind of a little history. You guys have seen this before. The GASB required, Governmental Accounting Standards Board required in their pronouncements 43 and 45 that if you're going to offer post-employment benefits as an agency, that you must have biannually actuarial report valuations done on the benefit. And this is really what this is about. But in addition to that, the GASB issued Statement 75 that just was hot off the press, that obligates state and local governments to expense net pension obligations as of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. That means the same thing that happened with Statement 68 for pensions, we've got to do the same thing for OPEB. The net pension obligation is on the face of the balance sheet so that everybody knows what the true liabilities are for the for the agencies. So the OPEB benefit is for health care, and the county has obligated itself to contribute towards the cost of retiree medical coverage for the retiree's lifetime or until coverage is discontinued. A surviving spouse or other eligible dependents who continue coverage are entitled to receive the county contribution. But the contribution is capped. And in 2016, the cap is $550 for a single person or single plan. Two party is $1,050, and family is $1,350. This is true of retirees as well as actives. This is the cap. So this valuation that was just hot off the press was based on July 1, 2015, as of that date, as of that report date. So our actuarially accrued liability as of that date for active employees is $7.6 million.
Bless you.
For retirees, it's $16.5 million. For a total active employees and retiree actuarially accrued liability of $24,158,000.
Hey, Joe, quick question. Wasn't that 24 million higher a couple years ago? Like 40
Yes, I'm
something?
going to get to that.
Good
In,
at that.
I'm going to show you those numbers
Okay.
presently. The good news is that, yes, the actuarial accrued liability is $24 million, but we already have $20 million in actuarial value of the assets. So the only unfunded value of that benefit now is $3.8 million. So we're 84.2% funded.
Wow.
That's pretty good. We're not even funded that high in pension.
So, Joe, that 20 million, that's an actual dollars?
Those are actual dollars that are sitting in the CalPERS irrevocable trust.
And so now we're about to put 3 million, right?
3.8 million, about close to $4 million.
Got it. Right.
And then we have paid off all of the, basically the unfunded liability portion for retirees and for actives, which is, that's the that's pretty big. I mean, that same number for pension for 14-15 is $45 million. So you can see that as it relates to benefits, we're really much closer to being funded with OPEB. So let me move.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may?
Right, go
comment?
ahead, Ray.
So I wanted to highlight, the first few slides Joe Paul had mentioned or had brought out with regards to the unfunded liabilities and in particular the new GASB regulations that we will need to adhere to eventually. Other counties are taking serious note of that in the state of California. And within the California County News, there was an article there that talks about Riverside County potentially facing layoffs because they are obligated to pay $1.5 billion in unfunded liabilities, and that's a tall mountain to climb. And I think it's finally coming to a realization: we got to start doing something about it. But our county's really kind of tackled this over the last 4 or 5 years. Really been trying to do our part to get this, deal with this. Yeah. And it's not only this county, it's other counties that are now starting to face the realization that they need to fund this.
Thank you, Ray. That's positive news for the county. Joe Paul, before you continue that, and I know that's annual contributions, in reference to 43, 45, and 75, OPED and then the pension, do they also include the accruals, sick time and vacation time too? We don't have to put those in the balance sheets?
Well, we do in our balance sheets, but in the notes, but we don't. They're not considered other than post-employment benefit, okay, because we are obligated to pay them the minute they retire.
Okay. Do investments or third parties, financial individuals or corporations take into account the balances of the accruals and the vacations if we ever decide to go out there for financing?
My understanding is that they do. They look at basically all of the debt of the agency, whether it's internally generated or externally generated. So what it does, it indicates the management's performance. How well is the organization managed? Okay, so I wanted to get to the ARC payment. So then 2007-8, we had a $2.4 million ARC. Following year it was over it was 3.2 million. But we have been controlling the ARC because in 14-15 we were able to get the caps. Those caps that I talked about, the 550 and so on. So this valuation for July 1, 2015 is good for fiscal year 16-17 and 17-18. So in 16-17, the ARC payment is $775,000. And the reason why it was cut over $1 million from the year before is because your board implemented through negotiations the 70% at 65 Medicare caps. So it lowered the amount of the obligation to for OPEB benefits. So it means that $1 million more per year can be spent towards services because your board took action to manage that benefit. In 1718, it's no longer called an ARC payment. It's an actuarially determined contribution. And that's a result of GASB 75. That was really all I wanted to highlight to the board.
Supervisor Barrios?
Good job. It's good to see it on paper, because I remember when during the negotiations, the dollar amount came out, and it said that on down the road, we would see the benefit of it. And here it is. It's in
It's
writing. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're $4 million away from fully funding the benefit.
Perfect. Supervisor Bertello?
Yeah, thank you. I guess this is a question more towards Ray than to you, Joe Paul. Supervisor, Chairman Rivas and I have been kind of working with the administration with trying to see if we could get away from PERS for some of this medical coverage. And we brought in a local broker. And I know our staff has done some work as far as compiling information to explore that avenue. And I happened to bump into him yesterday, actually. And I think he sent us a letter through Mr. Coffey's office.
Yeah.
I don't know if we all
received
that letter, but looking at the letter and speaking with him yesterday, we could still lower that number quite a bit. Just if we could just get away from PERS. Is there anything that we're doing right now?
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may. So, thank you, Supervisor Botello. Yes, we did put an RFP out in the street to healthcare agencies to give us some numbers to which direction do we want to go with healthcare. Do we want to stay with CalPERS? We weren't really sure what those numbers would be. Remember, last year that was 22% increase for the select version of CalPERS, which was for their healthcare program, and which was a significant jump. And it did put a big burden on the employees because we did have the cap, so it didn't really affect this because we actually had that cap because our obligation is defined there. But and I'm going astray a little bit, but Monterey County had to pay approximately, I was told, about $14 million that they had to pay to deal with the 22% increase. So it's a significant obligation if you don't have these, caps or this reform that was put in by staff in negotiations. So today I'm going to I did get some numbers from CalPERS, and that's our next item on our agenda, and I'll kind of go through that with you. Again, I just barely got them; they're hot off the press. They're preliminary numbers, but I think it'll be good for us to kind of see what those are, and I'll present them to you in a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we are looking at the RP. So now we're going to meet with the unions, the labor. So HR is going to be meeting. They're going to go through all of the RFPs, and then we will sit down with them and go over CalPERS, and then probably come back to your board with a recommendation at that point, which direction we want to go. Because there is a limited amount of time we have to actually go back to CalPERS to actually remove if we decide to go that direction.
Okay, because naturally we want to try to get the best medical coverage for the amount of dollars that we're allocating, and sometimes I don't have a whole lot of faith in CalPERS at all. But okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may add one more thing?
Sure.
If you don't mind. So that last slide that Joe Paul Gonzalez had up, it was
775.
Yeah, and I wanted to confirm with Joe Paul. Well, we probably don't have exact numbers on that, but half of that is
About half.
General fund
Yes.
obligation, and the other half is subvention or subvented funding that would be covering those costs. So the general fund obligation is much less than what it was in years past. And as you saw, that was the first one. There it goes, 2.4 mil, 3.2, and if if the board didn't take any action, that number probably would have gone up, to the high 4s, possibly 5. So that just, you see that net value going down, and half that figure on the 775 is general fund obligation. So I want to make sure the board was clear with that.
Yeah, that number would have skyrocketed.
Yeah, keep that number right there, Joe, because I got some questions. Supervisor Munson? Before we go to the public, I also got that letter, Supervisor Patello, and I kind of interpret that letter that they can't compete because of the ratios that the county has and the market they're in and the private health insurance thing. And the only thing I could interpret out of that is that this letter was asking that the county employees absorb more cost of the health insurance. That's the way I interpret it. With some exceptions of going in different directions, cost savings. But at the end of the day, any type of modification that deals with health insurance, it's almost short of asking the employees to put in more. They gave up the ceiling, the caps. They gave that up. They gave that 70%. They gave that 65 when you get retirement. They gave up a lot, and it's showing on that number that we put up back there, Joe. And if we were to go to a different direction to ask the public, the rank and file, to contribute more of their costs,
No.
as it is right now, there's a lot of employees that are thinking of leaving the county and going somewhere else, and this will trigger an exit.
Oh, no, that's not the way I interpreted it or understood the conversation with this particular broker. Is that a private broker could probably bring more coverage at that cost, or even less. But absolutely, we can ask and lower coverage any further than what we have at the caps that we have. It was quite the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, we could interpret
I
it different
agree
ways.
with you.
We
can't
could
do
interpret
that
the
to
letter
the
different ways.
employees.
I had lunch with, I believe, the same broker on Friday, and we talked about this subject. And what he brought out was that if you notice that on this slide here, the active employees, the cost is significantly lower than the retirees. His problem is that because the retirees' cost is so big, he can't do anything there. Because he's very limited of what he can do there. What he's suggesting is that we decouple the retiree from the actives in different plans.
That's right.
And I really don't know how we could do that, so long as we're still with CalPERS and we're still obligated under the PEMCA legislation to provide the same thing that we do for retirees as we do for actives.
Yeah, and that would be the key is to decouple it. And you're right.
Right.
And maybe that would, I don't know how complicated that would be, and whether or not our bargaining units would support that. Probably be difficult.
I'm not saying anything. Okay. Any other supervisor before I open it up to the public?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Talk. Anyone from the public?
Marty Richmond from House. I do have a short question before I make my statement. What is the head count on active versus retirees? We have a, and while you're looking at that, I guess I can make my statement. So congratulations on getting the OPEB under control. And I have a few words of advice concerning that. Don't do that again, please. Don't do what we originally did on OPEB. Let's not do that again. I remember when I came in, it was 55 million, I think, or some number like that. It was a choker, okay, just terrible. You got to think about before you sign up for a lifetime anything, So I congratulate you for getting it under control. I think you deserve a lot of credit. I'll give some credit to you and some credit to the government for implementing the general accounting standards. And this is the one time I'm going to come up here and give some credit to myself for yapping at your heels about this every chance I possibly got, because carrying that debt is a killer. Okay, just a killer. As you can see, you've already saved $1 million a year in payments. $1 million a year. That's a lot of money. As far as the health care, since it came up, I know we're going to see the figures. I think it's fair to point out that CalPERS took Northern California for a ride. Not everybody in CalPERS paid 22% increase. The people in Southern California, I think some of them got actually a decrease. But, Northern California, they took us for a ride, and we're in the worst position, not for anything we did, but because we're small. Therefore, we don't have a market, the kind of market power that other people have, and we can go in and do something. So I tend to agree. I think the employees have done a lot, and I don't see how we can ask them to swallow another increase if that's what that's going to come out to be. I do, but I think this is outrageous because healthcare is going to break us all. That's just the way it's going. But in this case, they took a 22% hit or whatever it was, and I don't think you can. And they gave up a lot, and they capped the OPEB, and that was really important. You can see the result right here. So I think it's just. I think it would not be appreciative to ask them to swallow another hit, even if the county has to swallow the increase. You can only take so many of those before you run out of money. So, what's the head count? And I'll get that from.
Thank you, Joe. You can sit down.
I can't answer that question because I'm out of time. No. Actually, I must have left my valuation report up in the office, so I'll email you that answer. Okay.
Well, thank you. That's good news, Joe. All right. We'll go to the next one. Number. We can do 7 now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go 7 then.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and take that on. This is coming out of our Human Resources Department. We were hoping to present to your board some preliminary numbers from CalPERS. They did actually have a meeting this morning. They actually did publish some preliminary numbers, and I will just briefly highlight those numbers. Again, they're just hot off the press, so we haven't done a complete evaluation of it, but we did want to at least mention this to your board, and we'll be addressing this in the budget and coming back to you probably on the 14th with more definitive information, and probably even sooner than that, quite possibly, but and then during the budget process itself. So the numbers that I have here before me for the northern region, adjusted for 2017 PERS choice, for just as again for one individual, this is going to be $833, and the 2016 monthly gross premium $795 currently, so a difference of $38 a month. We have PERS Select, $742 unadjusted, and its current is $727, which is a difference of $15 a month, and $976 for care, and $886 for 2016, difference of $90. So it looks like the Select, which a majority of our employees are. It looks like about $180 increase, so not a huge difference, not what we were thinking might have been. But anyways, we'll have more information. Preliminary numbers. I don't want to set this in stone. We still need to go back and delve into it a little bit further and meet with HR and go through the process, and then we'll be coming back to your board as well.
Thank you, Ray.
Yep.
Supervisor Munzer?
So that it's a smaller percentage increase,
Yeah.
but it's on top of the 22% last year.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Hate them. Absolutely hate them. You could quote me. I don't hate very many things. That and fish.
Supervisor Barrios.
No, I'm glad he gave us the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah.
Open up the public. Anyone for the public? None. Okay. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate those numbers. Number 8, County Administration Office.
Yeah, so
budget.
Yeah, so we have Melinda Casillas here. She's going to go ahead and put up on the screen there, on the big screen, our policies, as we mentioned earlier in the beginning of the meeting. There are a few policies that we had from 2015-16, and they're highlighted there in yellow. But there was a lot of discussion, or there are a lot of policies discussed today. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll probably be coming back to your board with some clarity with regards to the policies. So, Melinda?
Yes, these are the policies that we had last year, that we had approved last year. And then looking at updating the policies for fiscal year 16-17. Basically, we are looking at leaving the same policies except for the ones that you see highlighted in yellow. We talked about a lot of these reserves this morning, and so we need to take your recommendations and your approvals this morning, and we need to update these. So we will be coming back on the next special board meeting with these updated policies, and we've also been working on a draft to place these policies into the budget. So if you want, I can go through each of the items. We were going to, I'll start with the top, maximize opportunities to consolidate, collaborate, and cooperate with other agencies to improve service delivery while saving money. Identify opportunities to provide service delivery while improving efficiencies and saving money. Maintain the goal of a general fund prudent cash reserve at the recommended minimum of 15%. This morning we talked about a general purpose fund reserve with a floor and a ceiling. So we will come back and update that particular item. Maintain the goal to retain contingencies of at least 3% per fund if a fund balance is available as a proactive measure for unforeseen expenses or revenue reversals during the year. Again, we talked about contingencies this morning with a floor and a ceiling, and so we will update that policy. Direct departments to maintain the currently authorized 14-15. We'll update that to say 15-16. FTEs, CAO office will provide each department their salary projections. That includes step increases and changes to employer paid benefit rates. We've already done that. Consider increases to the 16-17 authorized FTE levels with new or increased non-general fund all-purpose revenue funding sources or on a case-by-case basis utilizing general fund sources. Increase transparency of the true cost of government, including cost plan charges in all general fund departments. Analyze the impact of the general fund's ongoing OPEB costs and evaluate the new 2016 actuarial study and the ARC payment. Department heads must inform the CAO of impending employee retirements in all operating budgets in order to budget accordingly. Continue to identify areas for evaluation efforts by staff, committees, or consultants to judge the effectiveness and or efficiency of county services. Identify options to reduce and eliminate services and costs in non-mandated discretionary program areas. Implement an expense strategy to completely erase the county's current unfunded vacation sick time accrual. Utilize the Teeter Fund excess cash to help pay down vacation and sick accrual hours, liabilities, and bring the county up to date with the OPEB obligations in the general fund departments. Adopt a rainy day fund with one-time funding as opportunities present themselves. Again, this morning you approved a policy for the rainy day fund, reserve fund, and so we will be updating this policy. or this item, recognize possible or estimated salary savings due to normal employee vacations in all operating budgets, vacancy budgeting. Consider including the budget proposed reorganization affecting personnel job descriptions only after Human Services has reviewed the impacts that may relate to meet and confer issues. Maximize the use of trust and special revenue funds and other revenue sources, such as grants, etc., to support programs and services that would otherwise consume general fund resources. Prioritize and pursue ongoing funding for county information technology, network infrastructure, development, operating systems, applications, and maintenance as means to maximize productivity and personnel cost savings. So I would like to say that we have actually used all these items in putting together our budget for this year. So if there are any changes or concerns, questions that you would like to present at this time so we can adjust our budget process as we've been going along, please let me know. And then otherwise we will update the highlighted ones based upon this morning's discussion over reserves.
Okay, Supervisor Botello.
Do department heads have a tendency to kind of shuffle money around when we have employee vacancies or maybe some other items of areas of budget within their unit to move it towards maybe even capital assets or something like that?
We don't normally allow them to do that. The only thing that we have allowed is sometimes we've budgeted for a position in a department and we have not filled it, or we've used, for example, Georgia. We've budgeted money in a personnel director position, and we haven't been able to fill that, and so we've allowed the money to move down to consultants in order to pay for Georgia. But other than those kind of things, and we take them case by case, we don't necessarily let departments move their money around. Okay. And this year with the vacancy budgeting, we basically looked at what your salaries were during a quarter and what you were budgeted and what you actually spent, and we moved that to the vacancy budgeting item. Okay. So that they were not necessarily allowed to just use it wherever they wanted to use it.
Well, and I think that's really, really good in the case, because you might have a tendency to, well, spend all my money so I could ask for that much or more next year. And as long as you have a handle, the administration has a handle like that, I think that saves a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I think our vacancy budgeting concept seemed to work pretty well this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the same thing, reiterating that we really did a good job with it. Again, it was our first time this year implementing vacancy budgeting, so it was conceptually we looked at it. We looked at the historical data, and then we put a number out there, and we're pretty much on track. We're about 3/4 of the year where we actually reached our full budget with that. So really it does it's really, department heads don't have the ability to pull from that, because quarterly we're pulling the money. As soon as that quarter period of time comes, we move that money over, whatever they're over. So they don't have the ability to do that. Unless, again, there's case-by-case scenarios. There's some certain circumstances that may happen that we'll have to address. But administration's been on that, trying to tighten that up. So,
thank you. Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The item that speaks to identify options to reduce or eliminate services and costs in non-mandated or discretionary program areas. I've had issue with that for a couple of years, but I know I lost the battle last year. But when we talk about non-mandated areas, that would be our library, our sheriff's patrol. Do we really want to do that? Do we really want to have this in here? Because those are probably the two main non-mandatory, departments. We have committed as a board that we're not going to do that. That the library is something that we want to keep, we want to enhance, we want to, move forward to do something more. And certainly the sheriff's patrol is something we've talked about, adding staff and keeping our streets and our communities safer. So I would and I'm not really sure what discretionary programs we're talking about here. It's very vague, and so I would love to just get rid of that statement altogether.
Let me pull the board. Supervisor Batal, you support Supervisor Barrios' position?
I'll support Supervisor Barrios on that suggestion at this point in time.
Okay, Supervisor Munzer?
I'm trying to remember why we put that in there. I think it was just to give us the flexibility because we were still coming out of the recession in case we had to go down that road. And I think we're past that, so I would support it also.
Okay, so.
But I would like to hear from Melinda to see if there's any reason why we should look at this differently than I am.
Okay, give me a reason why we should not delete it, Melinda.
No, I think we've made the commitment that we were, we've obviously made the commitment that we're going to fund the library and the sheriff's, the patrol. So I think in our budget we're able to do that. And so it's not necessarily an item for this coming fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Ray?
No, we can remove it, no problem. We'll just make sure if we have to, in future years, evaluate that or bring it up for discussion, we will. But
okay.
I feel like
but
it's
during
okay
the budget
to
process, the board's making the recommendation, directing staff to pull that out.
Okay.
And one other
No,
item.
you still got the floor.
Okay. Utilize teeter fund excess cash to help pay down vacation. I think because we may be going in a different direction with this, I would rather see that we utilize teeter funds for maybe non-specific.
Okay.
But say that we will utilize it as one-time funds for whatever, whether it be improvements, whether it be vacation, not infrastructure, the courthouse, capital improvements or vacation and sick, but to just identify that we will use it for this purpose is really, I don't believe that we want to go there and tie it directly to just those things.
Sure.
Ray, before.
Are you on the one right above adopting a rainy day fund?
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to ask about that one too. So, okay.
Ray, do you have any reasons why we shouldn't take it out?
I wouldn't say take it out. I would say we need to come back and
It's just wording.
and reword that is what we need to do. I would not remove it.
Yeah, I would recommend just
It's a-
rewording so that it's not tied in just to vacation and sick accrual.
Because
Supervisor Munzer?
Well, what my comment was, I thought in Joe Paul's
Yeah.
presentation, he was recommending, and maybe this is two different
this is
amounts. He was recommending using 600,000
yeah.
for operation and
That's right.
300,000 for the ERP.
Yeah.
ERP.
Is that
Yeah.
as opposed to going to using it for vacation and sick accrual?
Ray has a response, Ray.
Yeah. So exactly. So Joe Paul and I and Melinda yesterday we were discussing this, and that was one of the driving forces of slide number 13 from Joe Paul's presentation was to put money for operations as well as the ERP or for capital projects. And I think in the future our goal is to start investing some of that revenue from there to address our infrastructure needs. And so that's what we'll define in a global policy, but that was definitely what we need to change. That's why I was saying we need to reword it to match this, basically. Yeah.
Supervisor Munzer?
Okay. And I might have answered my own question. About in the middle of the page, it says analyze the impact to general fund ongoing OPEC costs. And then it talks about the ARC payment.
Can we stick to the treater first and then?
Oh, okay. I thought we were.
No, we're not done yet.
Okay. And then I'm sorry. No, I'm done with that.
Are you okay with
Yes. I'm
okay.
sorry.
Supervisor Batalla?
Yeah, I think it just needs to be reworded.
Okay, perfect. Mark, Supervisor Barrios, you still have the
That's
floor?
what I wanted to hear, that it would be reworded so that it wouldn't be tied in just to vacation and sick accrual.
Do you have any
So-
other items you want to talk about?
No, those are the only two. Thank you.
Supervisor Munzer.
Okay, sorry about that. So, did you find out where, did you realize where I'm?
Yeah,
Okay, so it talked about the art payment, and I thought Joe Paul had talked about that being changed to a different term, but then I looked, and it looks like it's not going to be changed to 2017-18. So for this coming year, it's still going to be the art payment. So it's correct the way it's written.
I believe so. We're going to change 2015 to say 2016.
No, I understand that, but in 2017-18,
Oh, I see what you're
the
saying.
art payment is being changed to a different term.
ARD.
A-
ARD.
Yeah,
Oh,
ADC.
I see.
But
Right.
that's not going to happen until the
It'll
next
be
budget
following year.
cycle.
Next
Be the
budget
following
cycle.
year.
Right.
All right, good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That concludes your
Yeah.
questions? Okay, thank you. Open to the public. Anyone from the public? None, I'll close it. Okay, you got our recommendations on these policies, Melinda?
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue to item number 9.
9.
Wow.
Last item.
Okay.
Go ahead, number 9.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about where we are in the budget process right now. And I have a presentation, and then I'm going to provide numbers to associate with that presentation. So first of all, a couple of things I wanted to say before we began. We've been working diligently to provide you a balanced budget. We're not quite there yet, but we will be. So we asked the departments to request what they would need to efficiently and effectively operate their departments with a level of service that they wanted to be able to provide to the community. Their requests appear to be well thought out, knowing that we still are within budget constraints, that we still face the budget constraints. I really expected the departments to give us even more requests than they did. And so preparing this budget's been a little bit difficult. So I would like to start with the overview, kind of let you know where we are and sort of where we're headed in any direction from your board. So we met with all the departments, gave them training on how to input their budget into the ERP. And then we reviewed all the departments' requests, the CAO's office did. And then we met with all the departments to discuss their requests and their concerns within their departments. And so right now we are working on balancing the departmental requests with the sources of revenue that we have. The requests, and most of these are in the general fund. In personnel, they requested 14.5 new additional FTEs with a net cost of approximately $900,000. There were some requests that were made that had revenue to accompany that, and so this is kind of the net. This is the amount that did not have revenue. We had a lot of requests and changes in classifications, which HR, because of the comp study and everything, we told the departments from the very beginning that we were not going to be looking at reclassifications. And we had some requests. I put these items together, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. A lot of requests to increase training. Departments wanted to start providing different training options for their employees, send them at conferences, keep up with their minimum certifications and requirements for their departments. And this was an increase of about $245,000. That also included an increase of overtime because in particular the sheriff's department, in the patrol and in the jail, they have minimum requirements that they need to provide training to their employees. And in order to do that, because their staffing issues, the amount of people that they have in their departments, in order to train them, they need to bring somebody in to cover for them, and so that leads to also paying overtime. So I kind of added those two together. So this includes training and overtime, and a big part of that was in the sheriff's department. Equipment, fixed assets, maintenance, these are one-time items. Vehicles and the equipment associated with that was around $310,000. Software and computers upgrades were about $150,000, and maintenance for buildings was about $450,000. There was also requests.
Hold on, Melinda. Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, taking these numbers, the additional FTEs, I understand, and training, I think we've kind of cut that through the years, and now we're trying to get it back.
Correct.
But in relatively speaking, like vehicles and computers and maintenance, are these numbers pretty historical, or is this more of a jump for this coming budget year?
This is pretty much a jump for some new vehicles, but some replacing of some older equipment. We have a lot of vehicles that have a lot of mileage on them because we haven't replaced any equipment in quite a few years.
Okay, so this is kind of almost $1 million more in equipment, computers, and maintenance that we haven't really spent for a number of years.
We haven't spent
All
pretty
right.
much,
I just
right.
want-
And then we had some departments, IT, HR, county council, and other legal issues and maintenance that were asked for additional support this year. In all the county, all the funds, general funds and those that are not general funds, these were the top concerns of those of almost all departments. Personnel, compensation, recruitment, retention, and pre-recession staffing levels. Equipment, fixed assets and maintenance, the replacement of equipment, the purchase of new equipment, general maintenance, and then space is also an issue and a concern to a lot of departments. And then again, service to the public, they want to be efficient, timely, want to be proactive and not reactive. So what have we been doing to try to address these concerns and balance the budget? We obviously have a compensation study. That's our number one priority this year. And we're in the process of having that compensation study done so that we can then review it and analyze it. We've separated out one-time costs and operational costs. And we've gotten, again, as you mentioned, there was $1 million, roughly $1 million in one-time costs. We've been analyzing current resources of funding opportunities versus some potential future sources of opportunities. We know that we have projects in the pipeline, PV2, the Del Webb project, Santana Ranch. We're expecting money, but we don't, we don't have that money yet. So how do we balance that? The use of reserve policies in the budget process, which Joe Paul talked to you earlier this morning. We've placed an emphasis on departments that can generate revenues and hold costs until a mid-year review. We've looked at that also. And continue, obviously we're going to continue to review these requests and make changes until we can close the gap. Our recommendation in putting together the budget this year, we've been working closely with Joe Paul, the assessor Tom Slavich, and RMA Director Brent Barnes to assess our current concerns and the estimated impacts of current projects each of these departments are involved with as a view of the future of San Benito County. Our recommendation in addressing the previously discussed strategies and concerns as a means to balance the general fund. We want to assist those departments and supporting departments that are involved in generating revenue for the county. Right now, our biggest, asset that we have is that there's a lot of building going on in this community. And to have the assessor's office be able to assess those new parcels, we feel is one of the best sources of generating revenue for the county. So we want to put, our recommendation is that we put money into the assessor, the planning, county council, in order to get those projects going so that the assessor is able to assess those property values. Fund the one-time fixed assets recommendations with currently available general fund reserves. Something that we talked about this morning was also establishing a capitalization project, unfunded depreciation, so we can be looking down the road. So we don't find ourselves quite in the same position where we have a lot of equipment that we need to replace at this point. We need, and some maintenance issues. We want to hold costs until more information is received. We've just received some information regarding the medical insurance. We know we have the comp study to be looking at this year. Some development agreements, funding is going to be coming in and closing out the fiscal year. And so our plan was to basically hold a lot of where we are currently with our FTEs and our funding, the services and supplies, until we have a chance to analyze a lot of these moving parts and come back to you in a mid-year review. And incorporate the general fund reserve policies into the budget. And then again, like I said before, provide a mid-year review once we haven't had all these balls in the air to juggle and kind of see where things end up in mid-year. So that's kind of where we are in our budget process.
Supervisor Barnes.
So now you want to see.
Thank you.
Actually, hold on, Supervisor. You can conclude your report, Melinda?
Actually, there's some numbers that she's going to share.
I have
with
some
you
numbers to give you.
Tie in, yeah.
I'll wait.
You'll wait? Okay. Ray?
No. Well, I'll go ahead while she's busy getting the paperwork. You know, one of the things that we've been addressing and trying to figure out is what our potential revenues are going to be, and it's kind of difficult with all the development and other things that are coming down the pipe to commit to something that we're not 100% sure about. So we want to be more accurate in our decisions and be more cognizant of how we're going to move forward with whatever we decide to go with, or what the best way is to address some of these issues. So with that, after the time is coming to a time where we need to go to the budget hearings, and we have to publish by the 16th, I believe, the clerk. It's going to be the 16th of June, which is less than a month away. So we still have a lot of work to package this up, put it in a budget, and then publicize it. So I think the best avenue to take, and I think the one is it's a little bit more. I think the correct avenue to go is to move forward with what we have, and then come back mid-year, maybe a little sooner, and then actually come back to the board with any recommendations of any changes. So that's kind of the plan. The other thing is too that Belinda will highlight is we tried to pull one-time cost out of operations and put it towards one-time money, and that's what we try to do with this year's budget as well. So she's going to highlight that in the spreadsheet. So Melinda.
Okay. So first comparisons, what you have before you is what we adopted in the 2016 budget. So you can kind of compare sort of where we've moved from there. On the in the next column, column D, is the 2017 department requested. This is what all the departments requested.
Melinda?
I don't think we have
We didn't
that
get
sheet.
that spreadsheet.
You didn't get that one?
Well, actually, it's one time. Wait a minute, see here. Yeah, one time funding. So is that the requested recommended item, the small one?
Yeah, I changed it
Yeah.
during lunch.
We got it then. Oh, no, we didn't.
I thought this was a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, super.
This one is just a very simple.
Which one should we see
She's
first,
pulling
right?
it from the system. Just the requested recommended.
So see this
Yeah,
one?
and
Yeah,
I,
she
I liked
doesn't have them
this
labeled,
one.
but yeah.
Okay.
The one that's up on the board and that Louis just passed out, it replaces the one that you just held up.
Okay.
Oh, I see, okay.
Honey.
I see. If you look at the bottom numbers,
Yeah.
they're the same.
I thought this was a little bit better.
More details. Got
comparison.
it.
So there's a 2016 adopted budget, so you can kind of compare where we've moved along to today. The 2017 department requested is what the departments requested, the revenue that they had, and the expenditures. And so where we started from is we had a $5.5 million deficit. Revenues totaled $38.5 million, and expenditures totaled $45.5 million. That left us with almost a $7 million deficit. We normally estimate that we're going to use $1.5 million of fund balance, and so that would have left us with a $5.5 million deficit. Where we are right now, based upon the items that we previously talked about, basically holding the departments to where they are right now, a couple of changes in FTEs that mainly had to do with the assessor, county council, and the RMA, making some changes there to help support their departments. We increased revenues up to $41 million, expenditures at $43.7 million, left us with a deficit of $2.4 million. If we use what we normally use as $1.5 million fund balance, we are still currently trying to balance almost $1 million. On top of that, we separated out, let me find that one. We separated out one-time items that we felt were one-time items that had a useful life of at least 5 years. I think you also have that. Where am I? You also have that page. These are
Before we go
one-
on to that next sheet, I just have a question on the interfund transfers. There
Okay.
seems to be a big difference between what we adopted and then what was department requested and what the CEO recommended.
On the transfers in. We've been working with the auditor's office, and they felt that we had an additional $1.5 million in other funding sources that we could bring into the general fund. We also increased some economic factors, about $600,000, and then in separating fixed assets from operational, we added in, this is if your board agrees, we added in almost $600,000 from reserves into to cover fixed assets. And then, so the other sheet that I gave you lists those fixed assets.
Oh, okay.
What each
hold on,
department
Melinda. Supervisor Botello, do you have any additional questions to the first two sheets?
Go back to the other one.
Yeah. hold
Okay.
on. Let's put the one-time sheet on hold for right now, and let the supervisors ask questions on the first two sheets.
Okay, so do you want to review the fixed assets or?
No.
Supervisor Batalla?
Oh, no, I see right here on this sheet here.
Okay. I think Supervisor Munzer?
Nothing right now.
Okay, Supervisor Martin?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, let's go to the one-time.
Okay. So these are the items that departments asked for that we felt were one-time items that had a useful life of 5 or more years, that we wouldn't be necessarily coming back and asking you to keep paying for these. These are the department, the items that they requested and how much they requested, and whether that would be money that would be coming from the general fund or if there was other sources of revenue. Oops. So the total items that would be in the general fund are roughly $575,000. We also want to include in the CIP projects some upgrades to the juvenile hall. We don't feel that there will ever be another juvenile hall, and basically we haven't had any improvements to the juvenile hall since it was originally built. And then we need to move the 911 backup center from the OES department right here out to the sheriff's office, and we've estimated that will be about $200,000.
Why do we need to move that? Is that part of the contract agreement, or is that something that logistically we need to do that?
Do you have a little bit more information, Ray?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Vice Chair. So the request has been from SCR 911. Part of the contract is to have them have full access to that site. However, we have technology in there. We have IT, all the servers in that area, and also we have our OES EMS office in that location. So they have been requesting for a few years to have it moved to the safety area, to the sheriff's organization, and they would have a separate entrance, and it would just be their office going in there when they need to go in. So that's the plan. The plan is as well that they would actually pay rent for that, pay lease, so it would basically pay this back over a period of time for the work that's being done with that. So they'd be willing to do that. But once we go through the process of getting this and figuring that out, then we would negotiate with them a price. So that's...
That was going to be my next question. There's a value to them.
There's a,
okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah. And one other additional thing, that would help us to then move technology into this office where the technology's at.
Yep.
So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Melinda? Continue.
Okay, and so the cost to the general fund that we're proposing to use reserves for would be, right now would be around $900,000. That's where we're coming up with $1 million. The items under other funding were still fixed assets. However, there's additional funding, for example, in the assessor's office, and a scanner. He has a SCAPA money that he was willing to use to fund that scanner. Underneath the sheriff's office, there's an RMS system, and that's actually being funded through the AB 109 process. As in the cameras in the grants project, the grant would be paying for that $18,000 for the cameras. And probation is asking for a vehicle of approximately $40,000, and again, AB 109 would be covering that. The planning department asked for 2 vehicles, and at the moment, we are recommending 1 vehicle. So that's what we've separated out as fixed assets, which we feel have a life expectancy of 5 years or more, versus operational. And so we put for now, with the approval of your board, we've put the $500,000 $75,000 from reserves into the budget. And then the other $320,000 would be added to the CIP project. Any questions on how we came up with that?
Barrios on the one-time funding.
Yeah, the cameras under sheriff. Those you said were the 18,000. That's grant money, so that title grant shouldn't be there because it just confused me. I wasn't sure where that was where it actually fit, but it is sheriff. But Melinda, why then, if we need 891 from general fund? I know that we may get the SCR 911 back up, the 200,000 we may get back, but what about the 120,000 for the juvenile hall? Are we getting that back from somebody?
No.
No?
So shouldn't that be included added to the 575?
So the 575 plus the 120 plus the 200,000 equals the $890,000 total.
Okay, and
right
where
there.
is that in the,
So the $575,000 is strictly general fund. Our departments in the general fund. The additional juvenile hall and SCR 911 backup would then be funded in the CIP projects. So we would need a
okay.
total of $1
I
million.
see. Eventually, we would need that money, but that
Right.
comes from a different fund.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm good, thank you.
Supervisor Moses?
Okay, so we're just talking about the one-time?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you have identified a funding source for these one-time purchases?
The reserves.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I'm good with that.
Supervisor
We
Moses?
also know that we have some funding coming from development projects, PV2.
Ray explained that
But
earlier.
we're not wanting to spend those at the moment. Should the money come in, then we would be willing to backfill the capital projects reserve. It's kind of our plan.
Supervisor Botello?
I think it's been a pretty good shotgun blast, and then in a couple weeks it'll be a bullet.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, Melinda, I missed, and I know you said it, where's the $2,000 coming for the scanner for the assessor's office?
His SCAPA money.
What is it?
The SCAPA money, he
Sca-
received that 3-year grant
Oh, okay.
of $150,000. And so it would come from that funding this
Okay,
year.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, Melinda, just for academic purposes, the general fund money of 571, which the 320 is CIP, the 571 that is spread out to the entire expenditure side of the budget, right? It could be in salaries, other charges, fixed assets, things like that. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Right. We will try to separate that out, but right now it's kind of intermixed. Yeah.
Right?
Let me just for my own clarity, what I'm reading here from. Make sure I got the right page here. So 571 on the spreadsheet. And you look at the actual spreadsheet that's handed out. It's a one-time funding item. So it's, from an operational point of view, that's not the case. So we're not putting this money towards wages or anything like that. It's going to be specifically to fix assets or one-time items. So just
So
want to
where's
be
the
clear
money
with
coming
that.
from?
Reserves.
That's what I asked.
Okay, so it's not part of this this annual budget by account classification report, right? It's not part of the.
Yes.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me ask the question. It's not part of the $43,766,296, right? Right.
The expenses are in there, yes. And then in the $41 million in revenues, we've added, on the assumption that you would allow us to use the reserves, the $575,000 in the general fund, we have, on the assumption, included that in the $41 million revenue.
It's under revenue.
Okay.
So we'd be moving
And
it.
then
we'd
the
be
expenses of
cutting it out of-
$43 million includes those purchases.
Okay, the $43 million has the one-time expenditures,
Correct.
right? And that was my earlier question,
Yeah.
so it does.
Right.
And Supervisor
Go ahead, Ray.
De La Cruz. So that's one of the, to answer Supervisor Batello's question is why did this number increase? It's because we're pulling some money from reserves to put it in there, so the revenues
Got it.
go up. That's the reason why.
Got it.
One of the reasons. There's a few other reasons as well.
Right.
All right, Supervisor Barrios, any other questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Supervisor Monza?
Okay, yes, I do. So on the page that's called Annual Budget by Account Classification Report, the one you have up there, we're $1 million short.
We are still $1 million short.
So we have to decide, I believe today, either to pull another $1 million out of reserves to cover this, or to direct you to go back and cut $1 million from the budget.
Right.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may.
That's where we are. We can sharpen our pencils a little bit more.
That's the plan, is to sharpen our pencils more. That's what our goal is going to be, to bring that number down or to completely have a balanced budget with the numbers that we're requesting for balance transfer. So we've been working on this, and we've been slowly, but we're at this point in time, this is the number. So we wanted to give you a snapshot in time of where we're
I
at.
understand that.
Yeah.
And I guess my question to Joe Paul, in all his reports and pages, is there still $1 million in the reserves if we wanted to take and put into this budget?
That hasn't been determined yet. That's what we're talking about. After we crunch the numbers, and we've taken out $3 million to put it in the rainy day fund. We're adding $2 million to put it in the capital reserve fund. Once we net those out, we need to measure how much is left in the general purpose reserve against the policy.
Okay.
That hasn't been passed yet, but there's a consensus to go forward with that. And once whatever's left over is basically above the floor, is up for discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll come back with those calculations and present this to us again.
That's the plan. And the plan is to do that, the next board meeting after the 24th. But, we may, again, remember there was a tentative meeting for, I believe, the 7th of June, a special board meeting, or in the afternoon of the 14th. So we'll let the board know in advance. If we can get it on the 24th, which is only a week from now, I'm not sure how much headway we're going to make with that in 1 week's time. But I think it's probably more realistic in the 1st of June to come back, and either at the board meeting we're going to do a mock. So we could spend the whole afternoon we're going to have highlighted for this. That's our goal, is to go over the budget, to again go over all the details, all the changes, all the adds and removes, and we'll go from there.
I think there's going to be, to answer your question, I think there's going to be some money left in order, if we wanted to do this. It's not that we want to use another $1 million. We will go back and sharpen our pencils. However, it's getting down to, where else are we going to be cutting from this budget? To be perfectly honest with you.
Supervisor Patello?
They're still scrambling, and the eggs, the omelet will be ready in a month.
Any questions?
All right. Anyone from the public?
We have impact fund money in the juvenile hall, so we're not moving $120,000.
No.
Do we have impact fund money?
No, we don't have any more impact fund.
Okay.
Any-
Thank you.
I typically would not allow that discussion, but at the end of the day, so we're good.
I have one last question.
Absolutely.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Back to the strategies to address these concerns to balance the budget. There's a statement on there that goes like this: place emphasis on departments that can generate revenue and hold costs until a mid-year review. Now, when you say place emphasis, does that mean it's an emphasis of money into those departments? Because this is my thought. Not every department has is a revenue-generating department, but it's still an obligation to serve.
Right.
So what do you mean by emphasis?
So we've right at this moment we've are looking at holding all personnel requests to where they currently are, except the assessor has requested that we do a little bit of, that we move some part-time employees to full-time employees, and so we were willing to look at that in order for him to be able to hire people to catch up on some of his backlog, and so that he's able to assess those properties quicker than he has been, which we feel will generate some revenue. Planning, they're still working a little bit on placing their positions where they need to in the RMA, and so we would still work with them on that. And then county council is a big part of working with planning and the assessor's office, and so we were also looking at adding one more deputy county counsel in their office. Other than that, we would be pretty well holding everybody to their current FTE count.
So it is in personnel primarily. So
Pardon me?
it is
Yes.
personnel primarily.
Yes.
Primarily.
The emphasis.
Right. We've already taken $1.3 million out of personnel requests. We've sharpened our pencils, and we've and in holding the personnel requests that were roughly $900,000 without any kind of revenue funding. We basically said we're going to hold everybody up where they currently are. So that was $900,000 of that 1.3 million. I'm sorry, 1.4 that you see in salaries and benefits that we've from the requested to the recommended. 900,000 of that was personnel requests, and then we also went back and took a look at PERS, and especially the safety area, and we were able. The safety has classic employees and PEPRA employees, and there's a big difference in those rates. And so we went back and we actually analyzed every single person as to whether they were classic or PEPRA, and we adjusted the rates accordingly. And that actually reduced the PERS contribution by $200,000 or $300,000. So we have sharpened our pencils. We're still working on that. But we also have a COLA. So we have some moving parts in personnel costs also that we're trying to say, let the dust settle on some of those things, and we'll come back at mid-year and review these requests again.
So the COLA's already in the budget, right? Yeah, because
They
that's
are.
that's a contract agreement. That's a contract.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, Ray?
Yeah, just some remarks. So, there's a lot of good things on the horizon for the county. We're not quite there yet. We've done a lot of hard work over the last few years, but we'll be soon reaping some of those benefits. I know Del Webb's coming in, and there'll be some substantial money, one-time money coming into the county, as well as PV2 projects. So there's been a lot of work. There is right now a lot of requests and a lot of work right in front of us in the three offices, in the RMA office, County Council's office, and as well as the assessor's office to address some of those new development that are coming in to generate revenue. So there's definitely a lot of work right now in those offices, and we don't really have a lot of staffing there to address that or to make sure we get those projects through. So we're in a catch-22, so to speak, because we have all these projects. We have some that are coming to fruition, but yet we still aren't reaping, or we're still not able to actually receive some of these allocations from tax or the one-time funds from the development agreements. So, but we're getting very close. This year, we're feeling pretty confident that we'll start seeing some of those benefits. But as of right now, with the budget, I think the best thing to do is to be conservative and to make sure that we have our ducks in a row. And then at that point, once we know things are good, we'll move forward. I really wanted to say thanks again to Melinda and to Joe Paul today. They've put a great presentation. I know it was kind of a long a long day, but I think these presentations really help with the budget process. It helps you think it over. It helps us kind of ponder as well what your feedback is, and then kind of helps us to address whatever changes we need to do in advance of being at the budget hearing. So I just wanted to thank them both because they spent a lot of time preparing for this meeting. So.
Okay. Any final thoughts from our fellow supervisors? None? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Thank you.